Hi, my name is Greg Canty, and I'd like to welcome you to the Win Happy podcast. I love chatting to people from all walks of life about their lives and their careers, about the choices they make along the way to pursue their happiness, and what winning actually means to them. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I do. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat about Anders Indset, a Norwegian business and life philosopher. Anders, a former international handball champion and entrepreneur, now spends his time writing and speaking at events about philosophy and the role of technology for humanity. Anders has many big ideas. He invests in technology businesses that can create a positive effect on humanity. And unlike me, he is very positive about the role of AI in society. He chats about his latest book, The Viking Code, and yes, we did have a big conversation about that horrible topic, AI. He has a lot to say, and I must admit at times, I found it really hard to keep up with him. Let's hear from Anders. Anders Indset, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me, Greg. Yeah, I'm doing good. In Frankfurt and enjoying a couple of days at home, actually.
Very good. Now, it's the first time my whole life that I've spoken to a Norwegian philosopher.
Well, it's first time for everything. And I don't even have an academia background as a philosopher. So we could argue we're all philosophers, so none of us. So I came to philosophy, I think, basically my whole life, I've been very interested in progress and the very aspect of learning in itself. I wanted to learn the German language. I wanted to dig into those thick old books and try to grasp the essence of the language, the magic that could not, as very simply be put into a different language, Norwegian or English. So I wanted to have that essence of the thinking in itself. And I was very curious about that. And I didn't have a structure, like a path within philosophy or a school of philosophy that I was studying. I was more interested in, thinking in my time and observing and trying to figure out the mechanism, dynamism of life. And that was always a part of me. I detoured into being a hardcore capitalist and was driven by goals as a professional athlete. But I always read a lot. And it came back to me when I saw that a lot of leaders and managers started to get all these philosophical questions on their plate. So I decided to unite the two of them. Actually, it was my wife that said, what do you do now? You sold off your company. And she said to me, well, you know a lot about business. You've seen all this company from the inside, and you're passionate about philosophical contemplation. So you're a business philosopher. So I started that journey, and I'm very much at the beginning. So that just gives you the context of the Norwegian philosopher, having learned most of his philosophical foundation in Germany from a lot of the great German thinkers of the past.
Okay. You have a very special book that's just after coming out called The Viking Code. And I'd like to dig into that book when we're ready. But what I'd like to do for the listener is that by the time we have that conversation, they've got to know you a little bit. And they can kind of figure out why this guy called Anders has written this book and why, and what his background was. And in a way, why we should listen to it, why we should pay attention to it. Because I think you do know, okay, what's that guy writing that book for, So I'd like to do that, if that's okay. So sure. A question I ask a lot of my guests is, who the hell are you and where did you come from? And I mean, right back at the beginning.
Yeah. Now, I was born in Norway. I was born in Trondheim, which is one of the larger cities in Norway, even though it only has about 170,000 people. I moved to Røros with my family. My dad wanted to go back to live with his mom and work from there. And it's a small mining town, World Heritage listed small town village listed on the border to Sweden. The central part of Norway gets really cold, a lot of snow, with 3,500 inhabitants. And I spent a lot of my my youth growing up there, very actively doing all the different sports, because in a small community, if I don't show up for soccer or football training or go to biathlon or cross-country skiing, they wouldn't show up for my handball or Olympic handball training. So that was basically the whole essence of, you work together, you put in your hours for the others in order to have an essence to grow yourself. So that was a very deeply ingrained part of my philosophy of progress, that it was about individualism, but also about collectivism, which led me then to going after that path of finite goals. I was very interested in the sport career. I moved to the US. I spent a year and a half in Nebraska, came back, and then I got an offer to play in Germany, play handball in Germany, and I moved there. And I founded my first company, an agency, the first online print house, and started to build companies alongside my professional career as a handball player. And along that path, it was like from an extrinsically motivated goal, and from outside, people would consider that a fairly decent career and would say that I'm successful. I didn't really feel success. So I was just striving for that next finite goal. So after about 10 years, I sold off my company. I quit the sport and I just let go. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know that this is not what I want to do. So I started to work a lot on that philosophy of, not trying to see the world as a finite strive toward a purpose or a goal or an individual structure. This is who I am, but much more in an Eastern way of thinking at it as a way of being, a path of life. So taking out those small things that is not a part of you resonates very much with, without any comparison to me. But when I read it, I kind of sort of saw that essence of progress when Michelangelo did the statue of David. They asked, how could you build this masterpiece? And he said, that was simple. I just cut out everything that was not David. And I like to look at life in that way, to say that just cutting out everything that you don't think you want to pursue or what is not a part of you. So that was my journey moving to Germany. Lived here. I've been living in Germany for the past 25 years, and had a career as an entrepreneur. But then over the past, I would say 10, 12 years, I started to write. I've written 6 books, spoke at a lot of conferences over the year around the world. And now recently, the last couple of years, I've gotten back to the practical part of my thinking, which is basically investing in tech companies or any project that I think could have potential to have positive influence, positive progress for humanity. I'm a strong believer in technology. I'm invested in AI and quantum and very interested in exponential technologies. But I'm also a very, very strong believer in the mensch, the human being, and to figure out kind of sort of how to cope with exponential technology. So my forthcoming book, having written the Viking Code now, is titled Singularity Paradox, Bridging the Gap Between Humanity and AI. It will be out in March 2025. And this is the second part of my work that I do. I spend a lot of time on. I do it I write together with a quantum physicist friend of mine. We call it sci-fi, PHI, science philosophy, where we dance with the thoughts and the ideas around, the progress of technology. So that kind of like wraps it in who I am. I think, today when I say we're in an era of generalists, I was always a person that could pick up something fairly fast, and was, talented at a lot of things. So I was very curious. So I built a broad toolbox without specializing in one discipline. And I like that. And today I consider myself successful for me because I'm privileged and I get up every morning to learn. Which take me also to that book that I just wrote, The Viking Code, that is a lot about redefining success and getting into that very foundation of what I think is a big part of what it means to be a human being, a mensch. It's to experience learning and experience progress.
Wow. That was some whistle-stop tour, Anders. Does where you live change you? It sounds like you lived in a small community and the Norwegian lifestyle, like your audience here for the most part would be an Irish audience who Can't imagine what it's like living in the middle of snow a few months of the year, I'm guessing. So that small community, does that change you living in a place like that compared to the big city?
I think every surrounding, I think we're all a product of our environment. You see, you can look at religion as a phenomenon, right? No one is born a particular religion. We are born into a culture that has practiced a religion over time. Then, at least that's my strong belief. And I think that every surrounding, the people that you are around, they obviously shape you in some form. It could be that you distance yourself from that, or because you realize this is not what you want to be a part of, or you lean into that and become a stronger part of who you eventually are. When you then move on, and if you let go of that stable, categorized environment, then you open up for new potential development. So, yeah, surely growing up in a small, cold place shapes you. At least it gives you a very realistic and also very, I would say a wonderful relationship to nature and snow and the cold. That's something that when you get up and you go out in the morning and go skiing to train and practice skiing for 10 kilometers, and it's minus 20 degrees outside. You have a very clear understanding of what it means to be cold. So, but yeah, I think every part shapes you, and it's the mental state that you are in. The more you are aware of, the more you are free to take up those nuances, the more it will influence you, probably. And I think that is true for every part of the world and every culture and every region.
I've noticed myself, before we started recording, I was telling you that we have a little summer house, and that's in a place with a tiny, tiny community. In the village that's closest to it, the population is 37 people. I was talking to one of the guys who runs a pub there, and he named all 37 for me. And I'm finding that big difference between here and there, the relationships you have with your neighbours. I was describing to someone, actually, I was chatting to someone at the bar, and he told me who he was. He was behind the bar. He was working there. So, yeah. And I described to him where we were living. So, you're neighbours of my uncle and aunt. Yeah, I said, they're great neighbours. And I reflected on that for a second, Anders, and I thought, well, they're actually my only neighbours because there's actually no one else up there pretty much. And that sense of community, and I'm only starting to experience it because I always grew up in, it's not like a heavy-duty, dense place. It's Cork City or living in the suburbs. It's actually very nice to be living in that community, and I think it does change you a little bit. What did your mum and dad do, Anders?
They gave me that also. And I come from a very stable family. We didn't have any crisis. I think, I didn't experience any trauma or deaths or something that was like very psychologically a part of my childhood. And we had a very stable environment. And my mom was a teacher. She also worked at the hospital as a nurse. And my dad, who was in communication, working for the Norwegian telco company. And then later on, he ventured into building a company that has done web services hosting and the new technologies within an energy company sector in their region. So, but he chose family over career. We talked about it recently that he had an offer to go and build the telephone communication infrastructure on the Maldives back in the 80s. And
it's warm there.
I imagine my life would have been different if we had been down that path. So these are things that changes you. And we grew up in Norway with something that I write about in a book called The Law of Jante. So there was an author back in 1932, Axel Sandemose, who decided to write the 10 Commandments of Moses, and he had a sarcastic exaggeration throughout the 10, basically stating that you should not believe in yourself, you should not believe that you're better than anyone else. You're keeping that collective, and that's keeping your ground and your feet on the ground. That was a very strong part of the ethos in me growing up. We shouldn't stand out. There are similar concepts of this in Asia, and I think New Zealand and Australia practices the cutting the flowers, as a metaphor for the same way of living. We should all like have that condition that the collective and the community was above everything, which I write about in the book. So in the beginning of 2000, there were athletes of Norway, particular, in skiing, but also in golf. Susanne Pettersen, Tuta Pettersen, who rose to the pinnacle of female women golf, and you had Magnus Carlsen of chess. They were like very self-confident. You want to become the world's best at what they do, and they were also a bit edgy. So people like they were patriots in Norway, but they saw them as something new. And the generation after that, it's what I take up in the book, where I write about basically having overcome the law of Jante, that you should believe in yourself, but you should not do it at the cost of others. So you should still keep that, foundation of a collective ethos. And the concept of dugnad is also a part of the book, a chapter that I write about. It's like voluntary work without the work. So there's a very strong sense to put in your effort for the community. Imagine with 37, 38 people, whatever, everyone has to come together to build a fence, to do all the things together. And it's based on that voluntary work. If we transfer that into the organization, you will also understand that if everyone in the organization is doing better, playing at a higher level, and you have an aspiration to grow, you are better off practicing against better people. It does the organization better, and you can grow as an individual. So it becomes kind of sort of like a reinforcement learning model where you buy into the collective in order to uplift the individual. This becomes very true in sports today, in team sport, where everyone has access to the same technologies. Everything is optimized, the body, the shape and form, the speed of the place, everything strategically that you do, everyone has instant access to that. So the only thing that then arises above is the culture or the capacity on the playing ground or the training pitch to go into the unknown and venture into higher levels, because that you uplift everyone around you, because you practice at a higher level. And you see that in the sport disciplines that I write about in the book. These are individual athletes, but they put the team, even their competitors and the referees, they put them in a part of that collectivism. And that was also the magic to me when I went back and discovered, like, all of a sudden a small country like Norway had all these world-class athletes: golf, tennis, soccer, you name it, the two best beach volleyball players, two best triathletes. And you see triathlon, it's you and your body, it's just, individualism all the way. But they had built a team where they came together and optimized, had a strong relation to trainer and the colleagues. And you see that throughout, that this model, and that was to me very fascinating, because how can you build a high performance culture that is rooted in values, that unites the apparent contradictions of individualism and collectivism? So that was basically the idea and the narrative of my book when I started to write the Viking Code.
Your father making that choice between the family and advancing his own career. Like the podcast is Win Happy. And for me, that's all about making those choices in your life to find happiness. And sometimes you can be chasing winning and you don't have the happiness part. And I think maybe your father thought, okay, I could go for this gig. I'll go higher up the company ladder, but I could be sacrificing maybe the family's happiness or maybe even his own personal happiness. Because a lot of that business stuff, it's highly charged. You're going up and up and up. And often there isn't too much happiness there. So that was a good learning. Were you aware of that choice that he made at that time? Was it a big deal? Was that something he wrestled with, do you think?
Well, I wrestled with it. I was 11. He was out running. I locked the door and I put a Post-it on the door and I said, I'm never moving to Røros.
I'm not going.
Yes, I'm not going. No, but I think this is something that is a part of my core philosophy, something that I think a lot about. And it might, I don't think, probably not many of your guests have gone down this path when it comes to winning and also happiness. So I think we cannot make ourselves happy. I think we can make ourselves less unhappy. And happiness, to me, is something that strikes upon you. You experience happiness, right? It's a part of the qualia, the consciousness, how it feels like to be something. And you cannot force that. But in today's life, where everything has become a game of optimization, where we have maximized the art of being right, it's a binary way of living. It's a thumbs up, thumbs down society. The reward mechanism is all built around instant reaction and not around reflection. So what I have, I also write a lot about this in the book, but basically when I say that, happiness comes from putting yourself in a position to be less unhappy. So I think everyone can resonate with one or two things that sucks out energy or holds them back. You can write down 3 or 4 things. You can I change one of them? And if you things like that over time, you will automatically put yourself in a position something called happiness, or you'll be aware of new decisions that you can take, or opportunities, or the wonders of the ordinary. So this is to me, a very part of not seeking a purpose or a meaning or happiness in life, but to giving meaning to life, where your activities, your action is intrinsically motivated based on your choice and not on your reaction. And this today in society, while we are worn out and tired and become the philosophical zombies just working around reacting to impulses, I think this is a very strong part of taking back that agency of the experience. That's the one part of it. The other part, when it comes to winning, the finite game of winning, that is something that if you define your life and your state of being and your success based on winning, the extrinsic validation, if that is your core, you will always be miserable off. There's always one lucky monkey that is better off, has more wealth that you can compare to, that makes your achievement less about the finitude of winning. So here also, I think seeing life as progress and understanding that everything in life accumulates into like a compound interest rate, if you like. So the small, active, consciously chosen step with high quality you take today, if you continue that over time, it accumulates into success or winning from that extrinsically motivated definition. But the real success is the experience of that small step. And I think that is, in terms of what we define as winning, the outcome of a process. High quality input over time leads to a high quality output. It's like the marathon. You don't have the marathon running from start to end. Your marathon, you break down into that next step, the perfection of that next step. And you do that over time and you end up having a good result. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but this is how I look at life. And I think that has a lot to do with winning and happiness and success at large.
Yeah, like for me, happiness is understanding that set of conditions in your life that genuinely gives you those wonderful feelings. And winning is how you determine winning. It's not following that rule book. It's what does winning mean for you? And that, of course, can mean a lot of different things to different people. The analogy I always give people is that you might get great pleasure from playing football. It just gives you so much happiness and joy, and you feel free when you're on the pitch, and that's excellent and everything. But if there were no goalposts, it might seem a little bit pointless. So that feeling of putting the ball into the back of the net, you're a sportsman, so you know what that looks like. You could be with your pals forever, but you gamify it in a way because there's satisfaction in that, and there's kind of the winning and the losing, but that's up to yourself. The conversations around the kitchen table when you were growing up, what were they?
Yeah, we had, it was very much about, organizing all the activities. We were very active. My dad, my mom, it was just packing bags, going to training and doing that. So we were like everything. But we had a very stable dinner time. My dad came up in Norway. It's also one of those cultural phenomena. getting home at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we sit down together and have what in many cultural regions would be an evening meal, dinner. We would eat that together, and that's a typical cultural phenomenon in Norway. So we got up to date on the day, and we had the school and the exchange, and we had that time. Obviously, back then there wasn't a lot of internet and smartphones to draw back the attention, so it was a stability, but it was a I would say we didn't have a very like extreme openness. Norwegian are a bit conservative and don't speak out a lot of things like to that in other cultural realms. So it was a joint conversation that wouldn't necessarily take us to a deeper level or hard conflicts or emotions, but it was like that type of Norwegian conversation, lightweight and respectful, where we just caught up on the days and the things that we have experienced without going into like deeper emotional conversations. That was very much a part of our, I would say, like very stable and structured and not a lot of conflicts, and not a lot of complexity. So therefore, it was very light-weighted conversations, I would say, and that was our family stability, as I talked about in the beginning. It was given, but we didn't also dance into that psychological deep dive on taking on challenges to that extent, which is, I think, typical also for many Norwegian families even today.
You're describing Norwegian culture in a very funny way. So, Anders, the young Anders, what did you want to do? What were you dreaming of?
Well, I said at a very early age to my dad, I'm never going to work for anyone. I probably was 12, and I've kept that in sense of, well, they're having contracts, but I was it was very important to me to have that freedom to build my own things. I like to build things. It was always a part of me, be it Lego or, creating stuff. So I'm probably like a creative person to some extent. I had a creative agency. I like to play the piano. I like aesthetics and things that are like, I see where people have put the beauty and the art into it. But I'm also a very, mathematically driven nerd. I like the data programming, get down, and understand. When we set up the online print house, I wanted to understand, every color structure, the machine park, where can you optimize? How is this process? So I've always been like that type of nerd also.
You were definitely an annoying kid, were you? How does this work? How does this work?
Yes, yeah, no, I was very active and also annoying. I mean, my dad said I could even, or I can even get how do you say, a rock to get annoyed of me.
So you said you were never going to work for someone else. So, and did you hold that to be true? What was your first business?
Yeah, I mean, I had some small jobs in my youth where I was an employee or like a summer job or an intern, like that type of thing. But my first company that I set up was a marketing communication agency, full service, beginning of 2000. So it was the start of e-commerce and like search engine optimizations and marketing and all that stuff. So that was my first company that really like was a part of like the business part of things.
Yeah. And were you working in that area, the fact that you set up a company?
Well, I came out of I started to write HTML and already 1994, programming websites, and I had built some pages in Norway. So when I came to Germany, I had that internet thing that I was very interested in, but I also had a very, very strong relationship to brands and marketing. I was always following the US trends with the agencies and had listened to a lot of these speakers and marketeers. So I started to study at the business school in Norway with the specialization in marketing. So that was a part of me. So it was very natural for me to get into that field. And I met my then business partner, who was a very creative person. So we set up a company together that we built.
Okay. And how long did you have that company for?
We ran that the company is still operative today, but it's without me. So we had a time where we understood that we have different ideas and understandings of scaling things and growing and building businesses. I didn't want to get out to have an investor to sold off because we had regional branches of it. So I just wanted employees to have a stable workplace. So it's still up and running today. It hasn't grown since. It's a pretty the same size, but I was in the company for about, I think, it was 8 years or something, like
Yeah.
9 years.
Was it hard to walk away from that?
It wasn't hard to walk away from it, but it was an intertwined structure of having some real estate and some things where he didn't have the money to buy what I thought was the value of the company. And I had been doing a lot of strategic consulting with larger corporations. So it was like a lot of these things when you're young, you set up companies and you think about ever splitting ways. It was more of an emotional part about that. Other than that, I think everything that I have left behind is a very conscious decision, not for something else, but to say that this is enough for me now in this field. So I'm going to go down another path. And that has been throughout my life that I could pack my bag and do that. And of course, I am also a person that get back to the relationship and I pick that up. But in general, I'm a very clear about, when things what I don't want to do, then I stop doing that, and then I open up to do something else without having that clear path. It's been, I would say, a lot of extrinsically motivated, driven things that I've done, but for the past 10 years, it's been all about what do I not want to do, and seeing that personal journey.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think that was a big decision by you. Because, when we get fed up of a job somewhere, you hand in your notice and you look for an opportunity somewhere else. But sometimes when you start your own business, you become a slave to it in many respects. This is the thing you created, and it's difficult to walk away in a way that you did. Like, we're in that same business. We're a full service communications agency, and I've been doing this now for 21 years. And before that in my career, I would have changed jobs at different intervals. And you do need to find something new all of the time within what you're doing. I often say that, you need to go on a journey and not do loads of laps. You don't want every year to be just a continuation of the previous one. So you found that was a good choice. So what did you do next? What change did you make?
No, I mean, we had a couple of different companies that we had invested in. And I just let go of everything, to the extent that I also quit my sport career, and I just found very like a strong pleasure in writing. So to me, writing is thinking, and I like that, and I liked speaking. I was invited to these conferences, and the feedback was good, so that snowballed, and I started to speak at all these type of different conferences. I got to travel the world and speak at all these events in all kinds of industries, which was obviously interesting because every summit I like to prepare, I like to be in the moment, I like to have a special nuance to it, and to me, I go on stage and I learn about myself. I go out thinking out loud, and that was a big pleasure because I also always got to learn about these industries and companies. So it was a way of learning. That was a good way of living. So I started to do that, and that just, I would say took off to that extent that prior to COVID, I would think I was up to almost 100 events a year. So it was very extensive, and I was very pleased to have a break that was forced upon me, even though, by all due respect, the pandemic and everything was not what we needed. But to me, it was a good way to sit down and get back to a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and I finished almost 3 books during that period. So it was a very productive time of my life, and I learned a lot. And I started to think a lot about the outcome of exponential technologies and where this is heading and the challenge in society. And I started to write about a new kind of existentialism that I was discovering, that a lot of people seem to be in a state of being undead, basically walking around like these philosophical zombies where the light seems to be on, but there is no one home to perceive them, which made me think a lot about, what is it that makes for a human being, a mensch, what distinguishes us from technology, and if we have that exponential curve continuing, what will that mean when we merge with technology? And I find very, very strong pleasure in going down those long, deep reflections on the progress of technology. So I wrote a couple of books around the topic, and that has been pretty much the last years until, as I said, about a year and a half ago, when I set up my venture company in Oslo and started to invest in companies having had that experience with all the ventures and spoken at these family offices and VC conferences, and had a relationship between the entrepreneurs, the industries, and the investors. So trying to unite them and support companies in scaling. And today I find a lot of pleasure in doing so. I'm helping multiple companies in their path for scaling good business models that has a positive impact on humanity.
You mentioned the progress of technology. Has the progress of humanity matched the progress of technology?
That's a very good question. I think, looking at it from an evolutionary standpoint, evolution is really slow. Is the development of humanity according to what many have predicted? Yes. Did the great thinkers of the past think about the technologies that we have today to that rapid development? Certainly no. But what we can see today, we talk a lot about Generation Z, Gen Zs, how different they are and how they have changed. And I would argue maybe they're not that different. If you look at the US election, a lot of these young people voted for Trump, which is the complete opposite of the ideology that we praised just 2 years ago. So what is that the environment in which we live as human beings have changed, but at the core, we haven't changed a lot. So I would say that, has it kept up? Well, it defines, that's the question of what do you want to keep up with? If you produce a world where everything you can imagine is theoretically also something that we could build, the question then becomes not if it's possible, but much more, is it a future worth striving for? So we get back to those fundamental philosophical questions. And I would argue that that the essence of our time is to have that agency to think about implications and to think about the problems that we have, the true problems that we have. So we have built a society that is all about quick solutions, and we are looking for the perfect solution to the wrong question. And when we understand that, we do not really solve problems. We just make problems better. Everything we have is about progress to create better problems, which requires a deeper understanding of the problem. I think we're back at some of the core skills that has always been a part of philosophy, what we are and how we live and how we breathe. So how we kept up with that, I would say we never keep up with technology because now we are being replaced at most of the things that human beings can do by technology. So we cannot cope with it. And Flora Neukert, my co-author, and I, we write about what we call artificial human intelligence, where we take creation into our own hands. So we go from the divine creationalism to humane creationism, and we build enhanced human being that is upgraded into coping with, infinite knowledge and linking up to these technologies. And that would be basically probably what you would understand with keeping up. So we would, lean into technology and merge with technology, but in a way that we understand that we keep our agency of being conscious entities, the qualia that we write about in philosophy. So I would say that from an evolutionary standpoint, technology is much more rapid than we are. We are now hacking biology and chemistry and taking creation into our own hands. So we are playing with evolution, if you like. So the next 10, 15, 20 years will be very much about, how do we upgrade our body and how do we evolve as a species, and as in comparison to the last, I would say, 80 years, where to me, it's been pretty much the same if you look at it historically speaking, what it means to be a human being.
Yeah, you mentioned the US elections, and for me, as someone who works in communications, I can see how technology has absolutely destroyed our ability to communicate. The algorithms and everything else, and people's ability to take information and accept it and process it. It's been absolutely destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. We have a world now where people don't see lies anymore. They don't see really, really bad people. They don't see crimes anymore. They just see messages that have been manipulated. And they believe all of that. And technology, and this is my huge concern with AI, I absolutely detest it beyond belief. Every time I hear the word, I just cringe. And on one side, you've got the champion saying this is going to be so wonderful for so many reasons. And I hear all of those arguments, and I heard them at the beginning. And the reality that I'm seeing, all I'm doing is witnessing the downside of it all of the time. I'm never seeing too much of the progress. A lot of the time, I had a senior director in AI in the podcast a number of years ago, and he was making that very point, that just because we're able to do something doesn't mean we should do it. And it seems to me that there's a big race to just do whatever you can do, because that's what we do as human beings. Technology, just push it further and further and further and further. And we're just not seeing the good side of it. And I do think it's destroying humanity in so many ways.
Yeah, but play devil's advocate here, because I mean, I've heard that argument many times. Yeah, like just because we shouldn't or whatever. That's a very good argument on stage, and it sounds reasonable. But then I would say, yeah, what does that exactly mean? What should we do then, right? So if you look at the progress, look at your life, how you work today. You have your summer house that you spend, 3/4 of the year. You can link up, you can work from wherever. We live longer. We never had less people living in poverty, despite the terrible wars that are going on. Never has less people statistically died in war as they do today. We have had 50 years of progress that has been achieved through technology, to optimization, right? So the optimization game has been a good story. That the optimization game has a flip side and maximized towards a single division of truth or one single truth, that is also clear. And then when we add all these technologies on steroids, that there is confusion and challenges. Well, that's not something new. Ever since Diogenes was walking around with his lamp searching for the honest man, we know people have lied, but it wasn't that obvious. And what we have created today is that the lack of trust, be it right or wrong, but the lack of trust in society, science, in a foundation, the will to truth, if you like, has kind of sort of vanished. So it's just a bunch of talking heads that hold on to some self-evident truth that they believe they have taken out of a narrative or a headline. So this, of course, is something that is very easy to fix in theory, because we today have instant access to infinite knowledge for free. So you and I could be having the same conversation with a couple of glasses on, and on the inside of the glasses, we can have a red light go off every time we say something BS, right? We'll probably, because of the ego, continue, but at least we'd have the perception that this is what I'm saying right now is false. We could have that. So now the question becomes, is there a will to truth? So is there a validation point? Imagine a politician going online, talking, and there's a real-time validation against a source that says this is right, this is wrong, and you have the sources. The AI only makes the same mistake once. Because if it is titled as incorrect or a mistake, it will be corrected, right? So it's just a short period of time until we eventually have to agree on some standards to have these models run. And then the question becomes, do we merge with the models or whatever? So in theory, AI puts us in a position that could force us to learn how to think. But the problem with this model is also our education and our parenting system has been all about knowledge and expertise and, doing the right things. And that, of course, leads to a confused society. And one could also, it's not that I hold of these values, but restoring trust in the US, with all the lies and all the things that comes with the new government, if a culture comes together and work on the things that might have been, exaggerated, things of ideology that we thought were of good purpose, there might be a reaction to that. I could take a couple of examples just to underpin what I mean here. If you look at Greta Thunberg, or in Germany, Fridays for Future, they have a very vocal part on climate. the impact of their campaign is very, very little. The impact on climate clearly comes from capitalism and technology. If we could build green energy sources that company makes money, and we take the marginal cost of energy down to zero, there will be a new business model. The resources that we have are sufficient to feed the planet. We have 8 billion people living here today. And the change will not come by shaming people into not doing things, but it will come from progress and building business models. So I was going to touch upon this point before when you mentioned that technology. The democratic system today, or politics, even wars, fight for territories, has very little to do with human beings. It's all about technology. And this in the US will be extreme under the new government, because you have Mark Zuckerberg, you have even Jeff Bezos, that has kind of sort of tried to friend up with Trump. You have Elon Musk, of course. You have the richest people in the world with the most powerful technologies who's going to play an efficiency game. And patriotism is going to strike because they're going to become more efficient. At least in the short term, this is going to function for a country or a region that is driven by an economical upswing. So that's where people come together. And I would think that, this is where Democrats realign. This is where Republicans start to think about, how can we cope together and that we are successful and winning. And you get all these weird things that human beings have done over and over and over and over again throughout history. So we could always face that argument that technology is terrible and has led to a lot of division. But if you and I today, travel to Malahide, that I love to go to when I'm in Ireland, and sit down at a bar and we go there, we are not meeting a bunch of Twitter trolls in the bar at night. We're having a good beer, we're having a laugh, we're meeting people that are, in a sense of positivism. They might complain about, governments and what have you not, but in that setting, I do not see all that negativism. I do not see all these trolls. I see uplifting, positive human beings that is up for a laugh and is up for a good way of getting along. We don't go into that bar to kill each other, right? So I would take out a little bit about that negativity. I'm not a utopian optimist, but I'm very much along the lines of a possibilist. Possibilism coming from the founder of the Gapminder Foundation, Hans Rosling, that passed away way too early, that had his lively TED Talks and had a factfully led, inspiring way to explain the world to people. And I believe in possibilism, and I believe that technology can help us get into a state of reason. But I would agree it's a long ways.
Now, you mentioned when you started talking about AI, you mentioned two things. You mentioned knowledge and expertise. And knowledge is something that you acquire, and expertise is something that hopefully you will accumulate over time. I see a lot of the tools being in a position to remove knowledge because the stuff is just there for you. And as a result, expertise won't be accumulated. Even when we communicate with each other, every single email or your tweet or your post on LinkedIn, you've got your friendly AI who's knocking at the door saying, I can write that better. As I said to you, we work in communications. I would absolutely strangle any of our team who attempts to write anything for a client using AI, because the minute they do, they become dumber. The minute you start to accept any of that stuff, well, you're removing yourself from the equation, your personality, your ability to think and put an argument forward and all that kind of thing. You're relying on a machine and you're learning absolutely nothing. And the problem for me is the trend is, and you have all of the big agencies, all of the consultants, your AI advisor. The trend now is, unless you're adopting AI, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with your business if you're not going all in and using all of these machines to do this thinking with you. And I always use a simple idea is you're on the operating table. You've a brain tumor and your skull is going to be opened up. And the doctor is looking down at you and he's reassuring you about his knowledge and his expertise when it comes to doing this function. I hope to God he's studied for it and knows it and understands it. And he hasn't just spat out all of this stuff, essays, just using AI, because you don't learn and you don't accumulate knowledge and you don't develop your expertise. We could go around in circles forever.
No. But I think it's very interesting because I understand where you come from, but it takes us a little bit back to that foundation of philosophy. So what are we good at? Reasoning, understanding. We are good at the art of being wrong to experience that we're going a different path. We're not very good at doing that hyper-specific, small tissue from the tumor to remove 100%. An AI, I think it's breast cancer, where I think it's the human skill of removal is a 7 out of 10. So 30% has to go in for a second surgery, out of which another one has to go in for a third. An AI today removes 100%.
I get that.
What I want to get at is just that the knowledge part of things, and what I think is what you're referring to is the ability to reason within a given framework. So my daughter go to school and the teacher said we're going to ban them from writing AI. I said that's a completely wrong way of looking at it. Let them write the best AI text at home using AI. Take them back to school and have a conversation and say, where is the AI, repeating things? Where is it not perfect? What is your thinking about this text? What do you understand? And this is, to me, when you talk about learning and knowledge, right? It's just an enhanced way of seeing what was flawed with the expertise model. I'm not saying we don't need the Messi and Ronaldos and the superstars, but what was flawed with the old expert model was we go to school and we learn and study to remember data for 1 hour, but we haven't learned anything. And I think there is just as much value if we tap into AI that we could learn deeper understandings, at least in my writing, because I have this broad toolbox that I've built up. I wouldn't consider it even as knowledge. I would say it's just a very, very broad toolbox of adaptable skills like you have built in your industry over years, so you can adapt to new things. Therefore, these tools could be an enhancement. So I would argue that your skills, your experience, together with the perfect AI, where you could, take out the bullshit and the crap, but do the magic and tap into new ideas, avoid any mistakes in terms of copyright edit or whatever, those type of things. I think that's a beautiful dance, but we're not there yet. But I think with the AI agents from next year, I think it's just a very interesting development.
Yeah, but where we are now is both you and I, and even the Gen Zs, have come through a system whereby they've read and they've learned and they've perfected language. So you've got a population who have the ability to assess good and bad. You say, absolutely, take the article and let's give the challenge to the kids. Who's going to write the best? In order to be able to assess it, you need the knowledge and you need the expertise. And we need to be very, very careful that we don't remove people's ability to acquire the knowledge and the expertise. And I think that's where we're going to. That ability will be just gone. So if I've never written a thing in my whole life and I've never read because, it's all just woo, whatever.
Yeah, but isn't it so then that if you look at it if you go back to politics, right? The generation 70 plus, they certainly did not grow up with the AI models. They grew up with the old model of learning. They grew up with the expertise. So I would say that if you optimize that over time, I wrote that in a book, The Infected Thinking, not the infected mind, but the infected thinking, where we hold on to these self-evident truths because we have been taught to know something. We have been taught to be experts, and we do not let loose of that, and we become insecure. So I totally resonate with what you're saying, but I would also argue that the path forward is then maybe to go down to the youth, and that's a very slow way of changing it, but to teach people how to think in terms of collaboration, co-creation, discussion. Because what do we have? We have the ability to create tools. We were given two opposable thumbs. So we literally have an infinite capability to come up with better explanations. If you are stuck in two opposites, left and right or whatever, 0, 1, we will not have progress. Progress comes out of two things. One is trust. So coming back to going to the office and working in the office, we used to have a company that came into the office. It wasn't efficient, but it had that serendipity moment where you bumped into each other at the coffee machine. You could talk over the problems last night that you would never do in Zoom, or you could have a dance where you have a serendipitous moment for a new idea. You had a base trust. So the base trust in society is important. And here you could argue that, okay, we might not be happy with the politician, but at least they can restore some kind of trust in institutions. We have a more solid ground to stand on. And the other part we need is friction. So we need various different opinions, like you and I have a little bit of technology, that we can do that dance to get into a new way, or we can come to some kind of agreement. And those two things, trust and friction, is the basis for progress. And if we don't have progress, the will to truth, and have progress, then we have a homeostasis, a static system, and that's a dead system that divides into absolutisms. And my argument is here that the old educational models of training on knowledge and expertise, that was. And I think this is also what you mean, because your experience and deeper understanding is not the knowledge you learned 30 years ago. It's, the whole essence of life itself. But this is the model that I think is rock solid dead and is dangerous. If we create, expert idiots out of school systems, they will be replaced by technology because they're not experts. They are professional amateurs, if anything. They work hard and they learn and grow. But that model, I think that's a big also part of how we could restore some sanity in society.
Okay.
We agree to disagree.
Yeah, well, I would say at every level, you need people to have the ability to learn. And my fear is AI will strip us of that ability because it's being fed to you. Now, maybe you're going to have very, very few people who will still have the ability to learn. And there's an awful lot more people going around the place, and everything is being spoon-fed to them. We did have a time when we had to work out all of our maths in our head and on paper, and then there was calculators. So as a result, our ability to work numbers, to very, very few people have that ability. You go into a bar, I swear to God, and you tell the person behind the thing, oh yeah, add 10% on or add 20%. If they don't have a machine with the automatic, and young people in college, and they're looking at you stupid saying, how much is that, please? I might have just said, add 15 quid on for yourself. And they're looking at the bill that was 62 euros, and they're like, yeah, could you tell me how much that is? And I'll put into the thing. That's kind of my worry. But anyway, your book. And it's actually really funny because I think it's a weird experience of someone so all in on AI and happiness. I'm not seeing lots of that AI world in the Viking Code. That seems to be an awful lot of very basic things. So you have a number of key principles in the book, Anders. Can you talk to me about them?
Yeah, first of my initials are AI, so I'm kind of sort of stuck in that AI wave anyways.
Yeah, that's okay. We are all of those things, aren't we? We are all colors.
I go very much into the factor of the mensch, the human being in the book. And the factors are, it's not like, again, as you experience, my thinking is dynamic. So it's not something that you defy takeaway rules or 7 habits or whatever, but there are some characteristics that I look into. that I think is valuable for an underlying deeper philosophy, for a lively, I would say in Germany we have the word Lebendigkeit. It's very difficult to translate into English because it's the essence of the vitality of life. And I think the book is, in the first part, it's about those athletes and performance, but in the second part, it's very much about how to apply this to education, politics, and business. And some of the factors or the characteristics that I write about, we've talked about the law of Jante and the Dugnad, the collectivism, but I also write about trust. I write about self-trust. So instead of having that, you should not trust yourself, you should trust yourself. And I see that today in very many institutions, what seems like a strong character that plays off of power and hierarchy is very often overplayed insecurity. So equip our kids or train self-trust. I think that's a foundation of trusting others. If you don't trust yourself, it's hard to trust others. That's one part of it. I also write a lot about the playfulness and to have fun and to enjoy things. I think finding incentives for change and having that positive, light-weighted thing, it's much better state to be in than to just discipline and have all the negativities and all the things that you should not do. So having that liveliness is very important to me. What I touch upon in the book, and I think this is also something that comes back to our debate on technology, is the skill for leaders today is to anticipate future scenarios. And when I say that, I mean, what do you think? And we don't reflect on what we actually think will happen. We don't have a plausible explanation for ourselves. So it doesn't, if I say I am of a different opinion, I say, but I didn't talk about my opinion. I just play with your words. So people they're jumping into that conclusive state of what do I think? And then I ask them, well, why do you think like this? And you go down to those first principle. And we understand that if we play with knowledge, we have to know our assumptions, because at the deeper level, we are not standing on solid ground. We know that, it's a spiritualism, it's a simulation. Is there some kind of other reality, multi-world? No one knows, right? So there is always an assumption, and therefore it becomes very important today, to me, it seems, to think about, what do you think? Do you think that the cell phone will go backwards and go back to Nokia 5110 without internet and we will play Snake? Or do you think it will continue? Do you think batteries on car will be better or worse in 10 years? Do you think we have more green energy, and so on and so forth? There are so many things that we could reason about where we would come to a conclusion and say, okay, if Africa today is 1.5 billion people, and in comparison to history, not all children or 6 out of 8 children die, but they survive, what will happen with the population? So it will grow, right? It will grow to 4 billion people. So now they will live in poverty and they will be warmer because of climate. What do you think? Do you think they will all swim over to Europe and we will build a big wall and we will just sit there and drink Chardonnay and see that hundreds of millions of people die? Or will we find some kind of structure to make most of them survive, right? Either by migration or by building new technologies or what have you. Most would say they will probably survive. So Africa will grow to 4 billion people. And what follows is that they will not all be living in poverty. Maybe 400 million in the middle class. There'll be new business models. They will start flying. The market of flying will, grow like crazy because we have 400 or 500 million new passengers coming into the market. All of these things are very simple to reason about, but we don't take the time to do so. So one thing that I spend some time in the book is to have that skill of anticipating future, that you have a justified true belief in your own world or what you think could happen tomorrow. 1, 2, 3 different scenarios that you have thought about. Because what seems is that we are in a very reactive society where we are reactive to impulses and not anticipating future scenarios. And therefore, we cannot build a healthy way of living. Therefore, we cannot invest into the future because we are too busy looking at studies of the past, reacting, which is a terrible state to be in because you could detour and make mistakes based on old data and not seeing the obvious coming in front of you. So this is one of the things that I think is very important, to anticipate the future. And I spend some time in the book also about that. So that's a couple of things that I get into.
Cool. Where can someone buy the book, Anders? And how can people connect with you?
Yeah, the book is now on all channels, Amazon, Barnes& Noble, whatever you can buy books. And my website is andersindset.com. We have articles there. We have a lot of new material coming out. There's also a page on what I'm working on now. It's called Working On. I think it's called Working On now. Yeah, Working On. It's on the website. There are some links to all my books, and I'm on LinkedIn. So whoever want to link up on LinkedIn, I use that every now and then. And those are the best ways to get in touch. The Singularity Paradox, my forthcoming book, is on singularityparadox.com, and the Viking Code is under viking-code.com.
A very simple question.
Yes.
What's happiness to you?
Happiness. Happiness to me is the experience of happiness. When I experience that, is that, you catch yourself smiling into the mirror when there is no one looking at you. When you have the sense of agency that I am something different than a processor, a machine. When I have the sense of feeling that it feels like something, there's some inner life to me sitting here talking into a computer, talking to a person, a human being. I don't know if you're conscious. I can never argue. You could be a perfect AI for all I know. But
let's not go there with that one.
No, but it could be. But no one can take this for happiness. No one can take away my feeling that it feels like something. And that essence of Lebendigkeit, the vitality of life, to be alive, that is to me the highest form of happiness. To experience life, the wonders of the ordinary. To me, life is a wonderful journey to nowhere. And the experience of that journey, that is very fulfilling. And that has a very strong relation to moments of happiness to me.
And what does winning look like for you? We spoke about that feeling when the ball hits the back of the net. Now, you're a sports person. You know the difference between winning and losing. And I know we can get into definitions about it. But what does winning look like for you? And even going forward, what are your objectives? What are your goals?
Yeah, so winning is, to me, is we have glorified failure culture and coping with mistakes, but mistakes, errors, losing, it's not a problem that hurts you. As long as the incentive for progress, the lust of future, the willingness to put in the effort to progress is higher, you will always get back up. You will always move on. And therefore, you will have an active life. And that has to do a lot with the winning, because obviously there are small things that you can relate to in terms of celebration and the shabam of the successful part of finitude of goals. I think that's important to have goals and visions, but winning should not be a part of your structure of what you are as a human being, as a mensch. Because if you define yourself in relationship to being better or beating others, if that is the part of you as a core, I think it's an unhealthy state. You need to have some kind of inner life and a balance of that journey towards that finitude of a goal, of a success, of a part of winning. So the finite games, I think, is important to master in the finitude of games, but it should never come at the cost of the infinite game that is life.
And in a way, it doesn't have to. Winning is as you define it, really. Everyone has a different version of what that looks like, or what success looks like. My one last question for you. So the idea of when happy is that you get really good at making decisions to make your life a little bit better. What was the one decision you made that made your life better?
Well, that's a really good question. I get a lot of that, what changed you to do that path, with the philosophy and writing. I think the one realization that manifests itself, and I have no idea when that came to be, but we talked about it earlier, that to me, the decision that I take of the things that I do not want to do. So we live in a time where we have more time than ever. And a lot of these, optimization life hack gurus tell us to slow down. That's a stupid idea when you have too much stuff going on in your life, right? We have more spare time. We have more, at least in the Western world, we have never had more time to create our own perceived reality, to influence our own future than we have today. So to me, the most important realization in life was that it's not about finding the right answer. To me, it's much more about leaving out the things that you do not want to do. And that I try to do on a daily basis, and to take out that energy part that sucks out your energy, or the things that you do not want to hold on to. So I think that is, and I have no idea when that manifested to that extent that I see it today, but that has been at least my big realization in life, that that's the life that I want to live.
Yeah, I think that's good. So your realization was that every day I need to make a choice to stop doing certain things.
It is one thing in the book maybe to mention, is a chapter on this. I write about micro ambitions.
Yeah.
And micro ambitions is just exactly about that. It's just about the experience of those small things that you can have progress on. So the goals, the visions is okay, but most of us will not come out winning the Olympic medal, or winning a Nobel Prize or whatever. So the progress part becomes fundamental, but it's only fundamental if you can experience it. So experience progress over time, and experience progress is to take out the things that hold you back from experience progress. And that is to be micro ambitious, to say, what can I do today? What can I leave out today to take out the things that are holding me back, or not, having me to perform at that level.
I love that, Anders. Anders, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So next time you come to Ireland, instead of going to Malahide, come way down south, and I'll introduce you to some of the customers in that bar. You might meet some of the 37 people.
I want to. I want to be that bar. I want to see, and they should have some rum ready when Anders comes, because all that dark beer and the stuff that you drink that gives you a crazy head on the next day. I'm good with the rum. And I want to be in that bar where you can operate a bar with 37 people. There's some magic to that. So I want to sit there and have some discussions about the one neighbor and everything. So that's
excellent. Take it easy. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.